Magic is one of the fundamental pillars of fantasy. It's what separates fantasy from other genres. John Clute in the Encyclopedia of Fantasy argues that the primary assumption is that magic is possible in the world of fantasy, and the exact nature of this ambient magic strongly influences the narrative. Magic often acts as a building block for the world building and for the story's plot, and an interesting magic system can always sell me on a series. So what is a magic system? This is a set of laws that govern how supernatural powers are utilized and created within a fantasy story. Now today, I'm going over some of my favorite magic systems in fantasy. However, I first want to mention that there are two types of magic systems. There is hard magic and soft magic. I'll probably make a full video on this at some point, but in brief, hard magic systems are when the author has clear rules and limitations on how the magic system works so that the reader clearly understands. This would be Alchemist from the Mistborn books by Brandon Sanderson, one of my all-time favorites, and even bending from Avatar: The Last Airbender. Whereas soft magic is utilized to establish a sense of wonder. It gives the setting a fantastical feeling because it's something beyond our understanding. It can have rules, but these are rarely or loosely described to the reader. Magic in A Song of Ice and Fire is a good example, where it's a powerful but little understood force in the world. And then there's Harry Potter, which, as mentioned in Sanderson's First Law of Magic, falls somewhere in the middle. Now both types of systems can be done extremely well in the hands of a talented author. I kind of prefer hard magic systems, but neither are better than the other, so this list is going to include the best of both of these that I've read. Feel free to leave comments recommending ones that I didn't mention. But first, this video is sponsored by G2A.com. In promotion of their incredible Hogwarts Legacy campaign, guys, all of you watching the video right now have the opportunity to win a double trip to Orlando, Florida, Universal Studios, Wizarding World of Harry Potter. G2A.com is running a contest for 5 winners to win double tickets, and your entire trip is going to be paid for. Your plane, your hotels, your tickets, all of that. Now at this point, you're probably wondering, how can you enter the contest? How does it work? I'm gonna walk you through it. Step 1, all you need to do is purchase anything from the G2A website during this Hogwarts Legacy campaign. Step 2, you then need to register your purchase and answer the contest question, which is to design and name your very own spell. So you simply register by filling out the form, and your entry number is your order number. And keep in mind that you can make multiple orders, and those count as different entries. So the more orders you make, the higher chances you have of winning. And then step 3 is simply waiting patiently to see if you've won the contest or not. And again, that's going to be 5 winners that win double tickets, meaning they can bring somebody with them. So make sure to click the link in the description so that you can enter this incredible contest. Big thank you to G2A.com for sponsoring the video. Now back to the video. First off, let's talk about Tolkien. He was basically writing a modern myth, and myths do not usually explain their magic in great detail, so it's little surprise that Tolkien uses a soft magic system. Now, in Tolkien's universe, magic stems from wisdom and inherent power. The closer you are to Eru Iluvatar, the creator, the more inherent power you have. So the elves and Istari are always more magically capable than humans, and the eldest and wisest among them are the most powerful. And it's interesting to note how Tolkien presents all power as inherently corrupting, magic being the most corrupting of them all. We, the reader, do not really know how it works. For instance, Gandalf defeats a pack of wolves by suddenly growing and lifting a burning branch to create a white radiance like lightning. There's no explanation as to how Gandalf achieves this feat or where his power comes from. It's simply presented as a useful ability that can be used to help the protagonists. Because Gandalf isn't a point of view character, we don't know what the rules are, but there are some rules there, and the only times that magic is used to solve anything is when the rules have been made clear beforehand. However, we often see Gandalf doing all sorts of cool magic and never doing the same thing again. It would have been really interesting to have a viewpoint character that did use this world's magic, because I would love to find out how it all works, but at the same time, this would take away from the wonder. In the Powdermage books by Brian McClellan, there is a more typical elemental magic, but even this is unique because it's tied to fingers on the hands, giving a reason for the use of gesture in magic. But what we're all here for is the rifle-wielding powder mages who snort gunpowder like it's cocaine and pull off a violent revolution. It's a lot of fun, and the best part is seeing interactions between the systems, and you know enough about them to know how things are gonna go down. The Runelords by David Farland. I really enjoyed this series. It's not one of my favorites, but the magic system here is so interesting. It definitely deserves a mention. Now, magic in this series involves ruins, and the most common being endowments. An individual can give an endowment or an aspect of themselves to someone else, and these aspects are things like health, grace, speed, strength, sight, and so on. And the givers of such things find themselves greatly reduced. If they give their health, they're gonna be sickly. If they gave their strength, they're gonna be too weak to stand. And giving an endowment is permanent. Sometimes people will voluntarily give up some of their aspects to maybe a noble, then the noble has all these different endowments, and they're called a ruin lord. However, sometimes people use blackmail, threats, and family pressure to give up their endowments. Commoners will sacrifice their attributes to their lords in return for money or protection. And this starts many ethical questions, but also starts a sort of modern-day nuclear arms race. Every lord must take endowments to be stronger enough to fight the enemy. And for instance, one of the main antagonists has the power of many thousands of people. This magic system is really well done. It's built thoroughly into the whole world. It kind of reminds me of something Sanderson would come up with. However, I do think that Farland's writing ability doesn't quite measure up to the concept, but the concept alone is fantastic, and I do think these books still hold up pretty well. The magic system in Fullmetal Alchemist is also one of my favorites, and this is based around the principle of equivalent exchange, which states that in order to gain something of value, something of equal value must be lost. This is the entire basis around alchemical transmutation in the series. Transmutation follows the sequence of comprehension, deconstruction, and then reconstruction, and the proper application of this craft requires not only a full understanding of chemistry and ancient alchemical theory, but also a sort of natural talent towards recognizing and then manipulating the physical objects with energy. And in order to do all this, you need to make a transmutation circle. Anyway, it's an incredible system, and if you haven't watched Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood, one of my favorite animes of all time, or read the manga, then I would highly recommend you do. Harry Potter's magical and whimsical world is all about the awe and wonder, and that's what makes it so wonderful. And like I said, this magic system sort of falls in the middle, but leans more towards a soft magic system. Though it does take place at a magic school, the magic system that Rowling's developed isn't actually that complex. It has some hard rules to it, but these often get expanded upon or contradicted with each book when it's needed, and the reader never fully understands it. Magical ability here is genetic, so you're just sort of born with it, and behind all the words and wands, there's little explanation of exactly how it all works. Although, to be fair, there is a little bit more detail when it comes to potions. Anyway, it's not a great magic system if you're trying to look at it from a hard magic system perspective, especially when you notice some of the contradictions. But as far as a soft magic system goes, it's very whimsical and just a lot of fun. And of course, the idea of magic being hidden from the world, a whole magical ministry that tries to keep this a secret, and a whole wizarding world out there with their own sports game, giant prison with dementors, and the fantastical creatures, not to mention the coziness of Hogwarts itself, this huge sprawling castle. There's so much magical elements in the world building itself beyond just the magic system that makes it such an immersive universe. Chromaturgy is the magic system in the Lightbringer series by Brent Weeks, starting with the Black Prism. I really want to read more of this series because the magic system is just so interesting. The users of this magic are called drafters, and it revolves around manipulating shades of light to form a physical substance called Luxin. The world building, the governments, the magical law is all influenced by the spectrums of light. While most individuals can only use one spectrum, there are a select few who can utilize all the colors, known as prisms. There's some incredible fight scenes where drafters are just utilizing what they can see in the room. They're pulling power from the colors they see in maybe like a chair. Brent Weeks does a really great job at defining the uses, limits, and consequences of the magic, but more importantly, he does an incredible job creating a world and culture completely shaped by how this magic works. All the buildings, restaurants, clothing, even an entirely fleshed out religion revolves around this magic. Architecture, the entire political system is designed around chromaturgy, and I really need to read more Lightbringer. N.K. Jemisin, in her Broken Earth series, creates a distinction between magic and what she terms orogeny. In this seismically unstable world of the stillness, there's some people who can harness the seismic energy of the earth and channel it as they will. And Jemisin worked with geologists to develop the science behind her magic. Orogeny has plenty of rules, and it feels very scientific in terms of its complexity. If you're looking for a series that feels like a breath of fresh air, that feels very unique in the fantasy genre, and has a really incredible magic system, then read the Broken Earth books. Now, classic elemental magic is nothing new in fantasy. In fact, it's even been kind of overdone, in my opinion, but I always still enjoy it, and my favorite example of elemental magic is Avatar: The Last Airbender. Here we see a really polished, hard magic system based around elements. Bending is the ability to manipulate one of the 4 elements: earth, wind, water, and fire. Each element having unique abilities and limitations to them. There's also energy bending. I'm not going to get into that though. The 4 rules of bending are pretty straightforward. Benders can only manipulate one element besides the avatar, who has the ability to utilize all the elements. In this world, not everyone can be a bender, it's innate. So, for instance, Katara was born a waterbender, but her brother, Sokka, was not. And the type of bending is determined by which nation they're born into. Bending is a skill acquired through study and discipline. And bending is achieved through physical movements and gestures that are all based on Chinese martial arts, and each element has its own type of style. I really love that the writers of the show took the time to properly learn about these different martial arts styles so they can incorporate it into the magic system. I think that attention to detail just makes it so much more immersive and makes it a really interesting magic system. And Avatar pushes the boundaries of its hard magic system without breaking the rules. You know how it works, but then there's extensions to the magic system that's kind of foreshadowed beforehand. It gets really interesting when you learn how bending can be utilized beyond its basic premise. For instance, firebenders can learn to redirect lightning. Waterbenders can pull water from nature, from plant life, and they can even control blood, and of course they can turn water into ice. And then the magic system is also connected to the spirit world, and even besides bending, there's a lot of magic and creatures and stuff in this world that I love so much. Maybe I should make reviews for each season. Let me know if you want to see that. The Dresden Files by Jim Butcher. Here the magic, plenty of it is unexplained, but also the pieces that are necessary to the plot are thoroughly discussed and foreshadowed, at least as far as I've read so far. If I were going off Brandon Sanderson's definition, I would probably place this again in the middle. Not quite hard magic, but not quite soft magic either. Butcher does a great job at showing us the relevant pieces before they become important. He also goes to great lengths to show just how much we don't know. He makes it really clear that there is a vast universe, and even a universe beyond that universe, of which we only see and understand a very tiny sliver. Now, if there's real-life legends of some supernatural power or creature, then it's probably in Jim's universe somewhere. Butcher pulls a lot from mythology. Some of it is pretty close to the mythology, and other times he puts his own spin on it. But as I'm making my way through this series, I'm realizing there's probably a lot more to the magic system that I haven't quite discovered yet, but I am thoroughly enjoying it. The Earthsea books by Ursula K. Le Guin. It's been twice adapted to the screen, and each time it failed to explain Le Guin's poetic magic system in any meaningful way. Magic here is relayed through words of creation. In order to channel magic, you need speak the true name of all things, but it's more complex than that. Magical power stems from having an innate gift or affinity for magic, but it's also an arduous schooling process in which wizards learn the true language. This language spoken by dragons is what is referred to as the language of the making, and to know someone or something's true name is to have power over them or it. And being that magic in Earthsea is dependent on the knowledge of another language, it's a privilege to learn, and the use of this is limited to a mage's knowledge of a language that they can never be fluent in. Now, almost like messing up a typo in a computer code, mistakes or carelessness can lead to catastrophic damage. The series features all the potential issues that can result in tampering with forces you don't understand, like accidentally creating eldritch shadow creatures. Of all the examples of true names being used for magic in fantasy, the Earthsea cycle by Le Guin is by far the best, in my opinion. In the Kingkiller Chronicle by Patrick Rothfuss, he's developed one of the most careful and interesting magic systems that I've seen. In fact, two of these systems contrast each other in a really interesting way. There's Sympathy, which is a hard system with very scientific rules and laws. And then there's Naming, which is a soft system that's very mysterious and hard to master, but incredibly powerful. I think both of these are done brilliantly, and it's really cool to see both types of systems working well together in one series. Now, in short, Sympathy is a system of energy manipulation. Sympathy requires a user to create a sympathetic link between two objects, so that whatever is done to one object will affect the other. So for instance, you can link two coins together so that when you move one coin, the other one moves with it. However, moving one of the coins will weigh as much as moving both of them, and some energy is lost in connection. It requires extreme skill and concentration and a strong alar, which is basically your willpower. And it has plenty of uses. At the university in one class, we see students pitting their alar against each other in a competitive duel in which they pour their own body heat, or choose a source, into their sympathetic link to try and light a candle before the other student. Drain too much body heat and you get binder's chills, which can be dangerous. And then if a student channels so much heat that they raise their body temperature to dangerous levels, they can be left with brain damage or even cook themselves from the inside out. It's very detailed, and though Rothfuss is not a scientist, he does a really good job balancing scientific concepts of thermodynamics with purely magical elements. And then of course naming, knowing the name of something, understanding its true essence, and then having power over it. This is nothing new in fantasy, but I do like how it's handled here. And Rothfuss has explained that he simply wanted the best of both worlds, to give readers the satisfaction of understanding a magic system and appreciating how clever it is, combined with the sense of awe and wonder that unexplained magic can offer. The Wheel of Time magic system is complex and intricate, and it's all based on the concept of the One Power, a force of the universe which comes from the true source, and it's divided into two halves, the male half, Saidin, and the female half, Saidar. Now, men struggle with their power and they have difficulty to control it, and it can drive them insane if they use too much, while women, on the other hand, channeling Saidar, surrender to the flow in order to control it. Male channelers, driven insane, once broke the world, and they're no longer to be trusted, and in fact they're even hunted by some of the Red Aes Sedai. The Aes Sedai being a powerful group of female channelers who are trained in the White Tower. Now there's 5 different flows that can be manipulated with the One Power, and we see some of the classic elemental magic here, like air, earth, fire, spirit, and water, and each of the 5 powers produces a different effect when woven, and the more complex weaves require more than one flow to be used. And it's pretty interesting how once a weave is created, the channeler can hold it to keep the effect ongoing, or they can knot the flow, a process called tying the weave off. Now, channelers can use the One Power to perform some physical feats, such as healing or creating fire and manipulating other elements, as well as spinning webs of light, and they can also do things such as traveling, making gateways, and creating illusions. And additionally, there's a select few who can access power directly from the Dark One, who's the main antagonist. Now, this is a very basic description of the magic system in the Wheel of Time. There is a lot of depth to it, and you keep learning more and more. Honestly, it's one of my favorites in all of fantasy. The Old Kingdom series by Garth Nix, starting with the award-winning Sabriel. This is a world where magic is controlled by harnessing the powers of death. The basic idea is that there is free magic, which is wild and corrosive, and then there is charter magic, which is bound and safe with the proper training. There's a line of people that are in charge of keeping the dead dead, basically protecting the world from undead forces, and they can do this by compelling the dead and the living using a set of bells that are infused with charter magic. Different combinations of the bells and ways of ringing them produce different results, typically with the goal of getting the dead to go back and be dead, or in death to go through the final gate. And the free magic users can also use the bells, but they do it for the opposite, to control the dead to do their bidding. The Old Kingdom series is honestly not talked about enough, and I highly recommend it. Now, Brandon Sanderson is the king of hard magic systems, and he's doing something incredibly interesting in his shared universe called the Cosmere. There's something called investiture, which I won't get into in too much detail, but investiture is the guiding principle behind all of the magic systems within the Cosmere. It connects all of the separate magic systems from all the series that he's written in the Cosmere together, and it's brilliant. They all follow similar guidelines as they're all part of the same meta system that he's crafting, and it's all quite detailed and consistent and tons of fun to think about. Really, all of these systems belong on the list. The biochromatic breaths of Warbreaker, where power is drawn from colors, and not to mention Awakening, where one can reinvest those breaths into inanimate objects, is such an incredible system. Much of the plot of Elantris revolves around finding out how the magic works, so I'm not really gonna spoil any of that. The Emperor's Soul has Forgery, which is all about rewriting the history of an object, and I found that so interesting. And then, of course, Surge Binding in the Stormlight Archive. This is by far one of my favorite magic systems ever, and the most ambitious magic system that I've read. I do feel like it takes a few books before we really learn about Surge Binding, so I don't want to spoil anything for anyone, but some very brief, quick examples is powers like changing gravitational orientation or creating illusions. There's so much possibilities in the Stormlight Archive, and honestly, it is awesome. Now, Brandon Sanderson has made a name for himself by pushing for magic to have more rules, and nowhere is this as obvious as his iconic Mistborn series, which is what I mainly want to talk about here. There's actually quite a few different systems in Mistborn, but let's just talk about Allomancy. Allomancers or Mistings ingest different metals and then burn them to gain different abilities. Burning iron allows you to pull on metal objects, while steel lets you push metal away. Burning pewter makes you stronger and more resilient, tin enhances your senses, zinc and brass riot and soothe emotions, and then someone known as a Mistborn can utilize all of these abilities, which opens up to some incredible combinations, and the magical system in Mistborn is simple, yet also incredibly complex, and at times it's utilized in some really clever ways without breaking any of the laws established. And it takes a lot of training to figure out how to use it well. Allomancy is by far one of my favorite magic systems of all time. Those are some of my favorite magic systems of all time. There's clearly going to be some that I'm missing out on. For instance, I just started Malazan, Book of the Fallen. Yes, I'm finally starting this series, and I don't really understand the magic system yet. It's probably going to take quite a while until I do, but I'm sure it's probably going to be one of my favorites, so that there's an honorable mention right there. Also, I've heard some things about the Jade Legacy series by Fonda Lee, and the magic system there seems incredible as well. I just haven't read it yet, but I would like to get to it soon. There's just too many books and too little time. But let me know in the comments your favorite magic systems of all time, if you agree with some of the ones on my list, or if you have some that I completely didn't mention. Also, let me know if you prefer hard or soft magic systems. Which one do you like more? As always, a huge thank you to all of my patrons. You don't know how much I appreciate your support, but I want to give a special shout out to Craig Johnson. I feel so bad because I keep forgetting to put your name on the patron list, so I want to give you a special shout out. I appreciate your support so much, and I'm so sorry that I kept forgetting to put your name up, but it's up there now.